Marxist socialism arose following the publication of Marx's The Communist Manifesto in 1848, in which he advocated the interests of the working class or the proletariat. He believed that capitalism exploited workers and widened the gap between the rich and the poor. Further, he envisioned that the conditions of the working class in capitalist countries would eventually become so intolerable that workers would join together in a revolution against the industrialists who controlled the means of production, whom he called the bourgeoisie. Marx believed that after this revolution there would be no social classes because ownership of private property would not be permitted. There would be no cause for greed or strife and therefore no need for government. And this would lead to true communism, a society of equality and cooperation. His view of history relied upon the notion that class conflicts over economic issues drove the events of history. And his ideas that workers had the right to organize and negotiate for better wages and working conditions took root in several European countries, although communism did not become the foundation of any government in Europe. However, his communism would later be reinterpreted and implemented in Russia and China in the 20th century. Industrialism was not the only cause of unrest in the 19th century Europe. In the first half of the century, almost every nation in Europe saw violent protests supporting more political rights and nationalism. The nationalist revolutions in Latin America succeeded in running off the colonial powers. These successes inspired people in Europe to try to use nationalism to throw out these governments they thought were outside oppressors. Greece broke away from the Ottoman Empire in the early 19th century, and then the Poles, Italians, and Slavs failed in their attempt to break away from the large Austrian Empire. In 1848, so many nations experienced violence that the phrase Europe in Flames became popular. And in the 1860s and 70s, two new nations emerged, both forged with strong nationalist fervor, Italy and Germany. In 1830 and 1848, dissatisfied French rebels overthrew their governments, and in the second of these revolutions, France established another short-lived republic. And then in Russia in the 1820s, a military coup promising a constitutional monarchy failed miserably, but it inspired future revolutionaries. Nationalism proved to be a powerful global theme in this era. Resentment over Europe's imperialist policies led to increased nationalist sentiments throughout Africa. As African elites returned to European universities, they brought back news of nationalist revolts throughout the Atlantic world. The African nation with the greatest national fervor in the late 19th century was Egypt. The Ottoman Empire, France, and England had all political and economic states in Egypt. The French had financed and supervised the digging of the Suez Canal in the 1860s, and jostling began almost immediately over who should receive the economic benefits from it, the Egyptians, the Ottomans, the French, or the British. England invaded Egypt in the 1880s, claiming they were helping the Egyptians run their country, and stayed until the 1920s. And although African nationalism has its beginnings in the 19th century, independence movements did not succeed until after World War II. The best-known nationalist movement in Asia was in India against the British Raj, and the Indian National Congress was founded in the late 19th century with the purpose of promoting a united nationalist agenda and with the aim of gaining independence from British. Another nationalist movement arose in India in the early 20th century with a different goal in mind, and this was the Muslim League. They sought not all India independence, but rather separate independence from British rule for the Muslim areas of the region. In Southwest Asia and North Africa, stirrings of Arab nationalism against Ottoman and European rule began. Egypt's nationalist movement was one part of a larger Arab call for independence from the outsiders who were corrupting true Arab and Islamic culture with the decadence of the West and the decline of the Ottomans. As in India, the era of Arab independence did not reach its goals until after World War II.